they rely on that payment, and these people are not making hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're looking at Airbnb to supplement their income, and delays in payments is almost like missing a rent payment. We're not putting food on the table in some markets. So you could imagine the urgency that we have to act with, but with little help along the way.
Well, let's change it a bit. The topic of the panel is, what can the banks do for you, or what's the dream bank? So, I don't know, tomorrow you could change something. What would make your life a lot easier? What would your bank do for you?
Sure. At least from my perspective, it's really about having that tracker on a payment. I know it sounds really silly, but being able to say, I sent this payment out to this beneficiary, and I have complete transparency to that through the life cycle of it. I mean, we get annoyed. They take, the banks take lifting fees off of those transactions. So the $100,000 you sent out becomes $999,000, and your, folks in your team are trying to reconcile that back. Even if you had that transparency, you could follow that transaction through the life cycle. That's probably the biggest one for GE.
I have to agree with that. Certainty about payment, clarity, having information about exactly where it is in the whole journey is really, really important. What I'm struck by, I was trying to think of an analogy. I've actually struggled with it a little bit, but simply being aware of some of the benefits which may come from technology obviously awaken us all to what we might be able to do in our industry. So, I mean, I have to credit our banks. They provide terrific support. They've been reliable and good partners for years and years. We certainly couldn't conduct our business without our current banks. But now we seem to be entering this new phase. It's one of the reasons we're here, of course. And the prospect of improving reconciliation or improving our capacity to see exactly where a payment is throughout its entire journey, or increasing the speed of that, or driving down the cost of that, or making sure that a pension payment or a payroll payment arrives without having some fees taken out of it. We really want to make sure we're delivering the amounts that are supposed to be getting to the target. So I think there are a lot of things we would love to see, and some of those come to mind now, simply because we're aware of the potential, I think, of some of the technological innovations that we're seeing.
It's interesting you both said tracking. At work, we have this ambition to be tracking pizza. Anybody know what Domino's is? So Domino's has this pizza tracker. And we kind of crack jokes about it, but you pretty much know exactly where that pizza is, from the oven to in transit to somebody knocking on your door. And we joke about it because ultimately our ambition and commitment to our platform and our community is to be extremely transparent in knowing where the money is. And if you could think about the number of people we service globally, and all the inquiries we get from our community, 90% of all payment-related inquiries are actually result of doing payouts. And if you really look at the 90% of those complaints, over 60% of those complaints are purely tracker-related. So I share the same sentiment. And ultimately, I think the key aspect of providing that tracking in our community, especially a community that's built on trust, is really we focus on transparency, incredible amount of transparency, and getting the money to them so they can actually use it. And what we've actually started doing to address that, because the banks are slightly behind in how they approach, and each market is different. Believe it or not, PayPal is preferred as an alternative bank payouts because they know they could log in and see the money the second we push it. Not that they could actually take it out and then go do something with it. There is another hop, but they know that they actually got it from us. And so the community is actually starting to adopt other forms of payments just for the sake of transparency and speed. So I'd agree with you.
Very similar. The only other thing I would add too is, you hear us talk about how we're trying to make payments faster and more real time, same day. With that comes, I know the three of us balance just the fraud side. I mean, the cybercrime stuff right now has hit us full force, and it's basic stuff of people mocking up invoices and things like that. So while we're trying to make accurate payments and make them quicker, we're trying to also counterbalance all the fraud, and some of these new technologies allow us visibility, which is probably step one of preventing that. So it's another thing that we think about a lot.
It sounds like a great segue into blockchain, because you're talking about tracking, recording, watching where things go, and blockchains allegedly are excellent at that. But just curious, who in the room is familiar with blockchain or could define it if they had to? That's pretty good, because this is a specialized audience. How many have actually used blockchain? That's pretty good too.
You need to swap seats.
Yeah.
All right, come on up. Yeah. Distributed ledger technology? Sure. So what about you guys? So we're hearing a lot about it. Are banks kind of coming to you with, hey, this will solve your tracking, your fraud prevention issues?
I can touch on that one. I mean, we have two use cases that we're doing at GE with blockchain. So one, kind of unrelated to payments, is just, we have those 200 or so ERPs across the company, and constantly reconciling between them of intercompany transactions, right? So a lot of the flows that corporates deal with are GE to GE flows. And so could blockchain serve as a utilization to really be that source of truth, so that you don't have to reconcile back and forth and have a lot of tying out between the systems? Where we've seen the banks come into play is a couple of them are piloting blockchain to basically move money around the clearing system so that they can have more control and transparency. So it gets back to what we were saying with, if they can give us transparency to our transaction and do book transfers without having to go through a clearing system that might actually take away those payment details that we need, that might be a value added for a bank to offer a corporate. And so we're doing some pilots there as well.
My perspective on that is I haven't seen the banks, which I love, knocking our doors down to talk about how they might be able to bring some of the new technologies to bear on their business or our relationship. So it's not an active dialogue. And notwithstanding that, we're obviously very interested in this technology simply because we foresee it's going to have a broad effect, and we need to get ourselves into a place to know how to work with the new technologies, how to deploy them, how to make good judgments as the marketplace changes, because there will be some transformation there. So we're very interested in that. We certainly have two broad threads within the institution. One, as users of the financial system, the treasury piece, and that's the part which I'm speaking about, but also we have a great interest in the technology from a development perspective, and the institution is working hard with many other partners to try and explore ways of using this technology to deliver, to help with financial inclusion, and to really benefit the poor. But within our own business, at the moment, we're not seeing a great deal of activity. If we speak to our banks about what they might be doing, we often get into a conversation about GPI. If we ask to get involved in, say, some proofs of concept, it's a little hard work. It seems like a little hard work to me to get the banks to work with us on this. I think this is potentially, it's a natural consequence of technology which is fundamentally threatening to existing ways of doing business. So I think we have to understand that. But it's the technology exists. The genie is out of the bottle, and I think we're going to see an increasing dialogue going forward. But I'm not seeing enthusiastic support for the technology amongst our banks with regard to me as a customer at this stage.
We've been fortunate enough to have some really good banking partners, and they're all eager to work on blockchain and help solve some of those problems. What typically gets caught up is they're waiting for the use case and the ROI to be defined before they act. And what ends up happening is that they become fast followers, not leaders. Unfortunately, in the problems that we're trying to solve, they can't be followers. They have to lead. And more our use cases, they're tied to individual people. We're moving money between people, not necessarily from company to company or intercompany, as similar you have. And especially we're so spread out, even if some banks are working on with blockchain, it tends to be what they could do within the bank, but not across the aisle with other banks and other banks in other markets. And so we appreciate the effort. I think we'd just love to see a little bit more action going forward. We definitely see the use cases. I think some of the banks on the Ripple protocol obviously have taken a progressive view of how to participate and how to execute. But I do think more and more banks are realizing the opportunity here. They're just looking for the right partner and use cases to drive this forward.
You want to name check a couple? It's of who's doing it right. You don't have to name the laggards, but who's doing it right?
I know there's, there's smaller banks that are doing it faster, I would say. Larger banks like Citi and Bank of America have a bigger problem to solve because of their footprint. Where I do think giving teams the mandates and isolating them from the rest of the banking world to kind of go solve for these problems tends to be working really well. Citibank has done some really cool things, even in the New York Stock Exchange, building a blockchain around that. They have a Citi Ventures group that actually is investing in fundamental technology and supporting them. And also the other part of what banks, I think, sometimes weren't doing that well before, but I think they're starting to get better at it, is, people always say fintechs and startups are running faster than everybody else, and they don't necessarily understand all the regulatory problems. Well, I think banks could play a critical role in educating some of their challenges that they face in running that fast, and take the help that they could get from smaller players who move much faster to solve for those challenges. I don't think any of the fintech players are out there saying, we want to circumvent regulations or go around the banks. I think they're just trying to say, okay, let us understand what your problems and challenges are, and we'll work with you to get there. But yeah, there's a lot of banks, even in other markets like India, some markets in Brazil are doing some really cool things.
Another thing we're hearing a lot about is these different protocols. This gets a bit esoteric, but on the tech front, people keep likening blockchain right now to 1996 and like the advent of Netscape. Point being, we have all these sort of like cool internet tools, but who's going to make a browser to make it work for everyone? Same thing with the email protocol. And right now we're seeing, who's going to win. Ripple's obviously up front doing a lot of cool stuff, but so is Hyperledger, and there's, other competitors there. So I guess the question is, what are you guys seeing? Who do you hear about the most? And is this going to be like a winner-take-all market? Is there going to be just sort of like one blockchain, or is there going to be a bunch of them?
You guys want me to take this one, or?
Start it off.
I mean, I don't know that I definitely have an opinion. I think I am super excited to see the competition, though, between them and what that's doing